you tell me your opinion, I'll tell you mine, and then I'll pray for you, you know.
Hey, Christie, thanks for being
Hello.
here. And hello, everybody. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for clicking on this fourth episode of the series that I have decided to title Searching and Finding, where I basically try to interview, I'm the interviewer here in a sense, some friends or people that I know that I met along my way, and that they are kind enough and open enough to share a little bit with us about their path, their spiritual path so far, their spiritual journey so far. And I like the fact that every time that I speak to somebody, the words so far are pretty key, they're pretty crucial because we don't see the future, but at least we can give a little bit of an outline of what's happened so far, and in the hope that it's going to be inspirational, or maybe it could resonate with somebody. So today we have Christie Lewis. I'm so happy to have you here, Christie, because you and I have talked several times, and
Mhm.
you are one of my friends that I've been blessed to know during COVID. The good
Mhm.
things that came out of COVID, because we were all a little bit more oriented towards our social media.
Mhm.
Both of us love reading, and we love books, but in particular, we share our Christian faith, and that's part of the reason why I reached out to you and say, hey, it would be really cool if we could have a chat specifically about that, and without any specific personal detail or anything. I think everyone can outline their own story and path, and I'm sure, because I know a little bit about it, I'm sure yours is a very interesting one. So at least I think so. So we start with my first very generic question, Christy, which is in spiritual terms, what how would you describe your journey so far? And absolutely take it from as ancient times that you'd like to start, however you prefer.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was born to a Christian family, and they always took me to church. They always modeled it at home. They were always generous givers and very loving. My parents actually were in a cult before they had me. And so they reacted to that very legalistic cult by loving me so much, like just being grace all the time. So my upbringing was very like fairy tale like in that sense.
Oh,
And
may I ask you, was it a Christian cult or some other kind of cult?
yeah, it was a Christian cult called the Church of Bible Understanding. And basically, it kind of grabbed kids off of the street, not kids, but like young adults. So my parents were both in their early 20s when they ended up in this cult. And that's how old most of the people were who were in the cult, because it was like an older man who was kind of gathering them together, making them pretty much work to support the organization. They didn't get paid, but they would go out and work and give their money directly into the cult. And they spent all the rest of their time witnessing, studying the Bible, going to self criticism sessions. It was very like mind control type stuff.
Wow.
And there was no element of grace involved. So it was very legalistic and very anxiety inducing for both of my parents.
Wow, that's interesting. And this was still going on when you were born, right?
No, so I was born, let's see, they met in the cult. They didn't know each other when they went in, but they met there, which obviously that's God all over. Meet your
Oh
future
yeah.
spouse for life in the cult. And so they escaped together with some friends in
Ah.
their like mid 20s. So I think they were in the cult for about 4 or 5 years. And then they had me about 10 years later because they had problems with infertility. So, yeah, it's just miracle after miracle that I'm here today.
That's a great beginning of a story. Actually, there's especially these two miracles that you mentioned. The fact that they were able to find the strength and the courage to free themselves from
Yes.
from those from that situation,
Yeah.
and of course, number two, that God sent them yourself.
Yes. Yeah. So they've told me since I was born that I was a miracle baby because they had multiple miscarriages and I almost miscarried, but they were in church leading worship when that started to happen. And they rushed to the hospital and the whole church prayed and somehow I lived. So,
Oh
yeah,
wow!
I've known since my birth that they were they were praying for me before, during, and that's why I'm here. So
Thank
that
God.
was a
That's
big piece.
that's such an inspirational story in itself. In itself, and so you're at that point then not being in the cult anymore, but they was there a
Mhm.
reaction from them from their side?
They had experienced a lot of trauma, both of them, both before and during their time in the cult. And so it took a long time of healing for them to kind of recover from that. And I think their reaction to the very cult like atmosphere of mind control and no grace, it was very like all about your works and like I said, self-criticism sessions, kind of like you would see in a very communist country that's very totalitarian. So with me, they were just so focused on making sure that I knew I was loved and that God loved me and that all that mattered was that, Jesus had saved me and, you know, everything else could be worked on throughout life. So I just grew up knowing in that atmosphere that I wasn't a perfect person, but that was okay. God was caring about me and with me, and I could just keep working on that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I love what you're saying about grace. You said you're focused on that because, especially your parents, because before whatever type of ideology that cult was based on was lacking grace. In what sense? I mean, does it mean that in that case, love from God was not for granted? Well, is that what it means?
Yeah, they just never really talked about love in the cult. It was not really a religion of love for them. It was about studying, telling everybody that they are sinful and that they needed God to save them, and it was about making sure that your actions line up with what you're saying. And if anybody noticed a fault in you, they would bring it to the self criticism sessions and they would call people out and say, I saw this person doing or saying this. This person swore, or something. And they would have to stand up in the group and the group would like chastise them. And it was just very, very traumatic.
Wow,
So,
I bet it doesn't even sound like self-criticism. It sounds more like a inquisition type of like
yeah,
other criticism. Uh,
yeah.
in So that's very interesting. And in that kind of reaction, so in, let's say, maybe embracing and understanding the love of the
Yeah.
gospel of Christ, etc. Do you think then your parents fell fairly easily into Christian, let's call it regular Protestant Christian environment?
Yeah. So it's interesting because my dad grew up in his mother was Catholic and his dad was an atheist. And they both died when he was 15, like within months of each other. And so he was really on his own for a couple years before getting into the cult. So the cult was his first actual personal religious experience. And he's probably like an Enneagram 5, if you know what that's like, or maybe a 6. So he's very like intellectual in a lot of his thinking. And so he did a lot of research um, as he was in the cult. And he always kept his eyes out. He wasn't completely indoctrinated. And so he and my mom, it might have been my dad first actually, went to a grace crusade. And that's how he heard about not just Jesus, but like the fact that Jesus loves and forgives, and it's about grace and not about how sinful we are. It's about what Jesus did. It's not about what we do. So that, I think, and after that, ever since then, he's been really interested in researching cults. And so, yeah, he brought that into my education as a young person as well, that you really do have to think these things out, and it takes time. But
wow. But it really sounds like, sometimes we talk about the slight differences between denominations or maybe practices, but this sounds like such a substantial, let's call it what it is, heresy, right?
Yeah, definitely.
It
was really about getting the young people to work for them. They stole all the money from the young people. I think that was really yeah.
Oh, wow. I didn't even know that detail. Okay, so we are, I think, on the extreme end of the spectrum here.
Yeah.
Massive, almost criminal, let's say criminal organization.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's criminal.
And so, and what is a grace crusade?
I forget. Wayne Momblo. Have you ever heard of Wayne Momblo?
Mm-mm.
Okay. So there was, you know who Billy Graham is?
Yeah.
Similar to Billy Graham. I'm not sure of the specific differences between like Wayne Momblo's message and Billy Graham's message, but that's pretty much what my parents ended up at, was like a Billy Graham crusade type thing. And that for them, my mom actually grew up in a Christian family, but she just had a lot of difficulties when she was a teenager. She ran away from home. She got involved with drugs. So the cult probably saved her life in that it took her out of the drug scene. But other than that, it was just traumatic and bad. So I'm glad that they ended up together and got to this grace crusade. I mean, God really knows what we need, I guess, in our lives.
Honestly, that's so true. That's so true. And your parents, they sound like they had quite a life, adventurous and full of challenges, but it sounds like they've been able to overcome them.
Yeah, they've done amazing. Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
So, and then here you come, and that's obviously one of the various miracles in their life. From terms your spirituality, it's probably okay to assume that you accepted it because they were loving parents, and they are, and so you didn't have, let's say, any type of rejection of that, at least when you were young. But what about later on?
Yeah, so I feel like if for anybody who's going to make their faith real, even in this like ideal circumstance, like what I was given, there is going to be a period where you are questioning things. And for me, that never took the form of leaving the faith or even really considering leaving the faith. I always had faith as long as I can remember. I just believed in God, and I believed in what the Bible said because, one, my parents lived it out so enthusiastically and lovingly. And I was always surrounded by people who did that. I just had so many people in my life who modeled it out. And so for me, when I first kind of came out of the cocoon, you could say, I was about 14 because I started public high school. So I was in Christian school all my school age until 14. So public high school was really intense for me. And people laughed at me. People gossiped about me. It was tough. It was really tough. The social dynamics were tough. I tried witnessing.
People from outside the school, you mean?
Kids at the school.
Oh, at this Christian school?
No, at the public school. Once I graduated from the Christian schools. Yeah.
Okay, you were seen as let's say, the religious person, the person. Okay, indoctrinated, etc. And
right.
And this was your first moment, out to the sharks, let's say.
Yes, exactly. So
Okay.
that was tough. And I had a lot of questions. I was always interested in, I remember the first time I really had a question that the church wasn't really necessarily answering satisfactorily for me was I was like, why? How could God send some people to hell if they've never even heard of him? Growing up, that was like a big concern. And so I had people who would try to explain it to me. And, you know, I didn't question things too much, but they bothered me. I had anxiety about stuff like that. And then when I was in high school, I was suddenly bombarded with lots of big questions like that, like evolution. I'd always been raised. I just had never really heard about evolution until I was in public high school.
Oh,
We just never talked about it. And so there was that. And then there were several things like that were like cognitive dissonance for me. And I just have eventually sort of realized throughout my adult life that I'm always going to have questions like that. There's always going to be a lot that I don't understand. I have to do my best to keep researching it. But honestly, a lot of those things, they don't affect what I believe ultimately. They're just ways for me to kind of stretch my faith and be able to relate to other people better who maybe just don't naturally have such a strong faith. I've just really never questioned it. It's always felt so real and true for me that my faith has. So
yeah. You said something really beautiful. You said, it's not that it's very difficult for your faith to become real or to become maybe profound and radicated properly in your soul, unless not unless you leave, but unless you have at least one moment as a teenager, maybe, or whenever in your life, it doesn't matter, when you have that type of devil's advocate moment where you really genuinely and profoundly question it, right?
yeah,
So that's interesting because I agree with you completely in the sense that there might be people who never question it and are not questioning their faith, but there is maybe a fragility in an extra fragility in a faith that's never been questioned inside
yeah.
yourself. While if you question it, you put on that type of fundamental pillars and columns, and it's more solid, isn't it?
Yeah. I felt like my faith became a lot more real when it became tested and I had to talk about it. And I was actually talking with people who didn't believe what I believed. So my husband and I are actually really big advocates of making sure that when you're raising kids, they're not like super inside the bubble because I just experienced that. And it was wonderful. It was a wonderful childhood, but I feel like it's really important for kids to realize there are other kids out there who do not believe what you believe, and you have to be able to relate to them and talk to them and love them. So
Yeah, we
that's something we talk about a lot.
we are all children of God, every one of us. And this actually is a great segue for my next question, which is okay. Our faith in the world. How do you live your faith in the world in the sense of how free do you feel to share about your faith in whatever situation, even online on YouTube or whatever kind of worldly situation you find yourself in, or how not so free do you feel?
Oh, that's a great question. And I think a lot of people of faith have a lot of anxiety surrounding that question. So that's really important to examine. I think in my case, just the way my life has worked out, because I do have autoimmune illnesses and I'm pretty much homebound most of the time, unless I'm going to doctor visits. My life hasn't really been out in the world, so to speak. High school, and then early college was really the only time when I was out in the world. So for me, a lot of it is just online, and I just try to be myself, and I try to share my faith in every way that I can online, because that's where I've been. I guess that's the social sphere that I have been given. So I feel pretty free to just share it online. And if people don't like it, they probably just unsubscribe and don't listen to me.
Yeah, and have you seen maybe any type of evolution or development from the very beginning of your online, making videos on your channel? That is, by the way, I should have mentioned before, Dostoevski in Space,
Oh
the
yeah.
maybe the most original channel title that I know of in BookTube that talks about books.
Thank
But
you.
have you seen that? Have you seen a kind of I don't know, gradual evolution of your feelings, at least in terms of your faith from the very beginning
Um
of how to
yeah.
share?
Of how to share, you said?
Yeah, of the way, not in the sense of how you feel about your faith, but in the sense of your feelings about sharing and talking about it.
Um I would say um I would say I've always kind of been the kind of person who is pretty much myself no matter who I'm around, and that my faith is just so ingrained in me. There's no way that I can really turn that off, but I do I guess I don't really, it's something that I wish that I could and did do more, is really share my faith with people, I guess. I guess the only, yeah, that's a really tough question to answer. For me, most of the people that I'm with are online, and so when I talk to people one on one, that's when we have the best conversations, I think, for sharing the faith. And I really like it like that. I like being able to talk one on one with people and share. So that, I guess, that has changed since I was younger. I would probably be going places and doing things with people and meeting people places. And now it's gradually become like all online because that's just what my health allows for. So I guess I haven't really changed in that sense. It's been more of like a circumstantial change.
And by the way, we were chatting before this video. Am I understanding correctly that potentially and hopefully your health is actually improving, and that might maybe open up some opportunities for you to interact more, let's call it in the real
Yeah,
person?
the real world, yeah. That is the hope. We have plans and ideas for things that we want to do, even if my health isn't like quite like a normal person's. um, you know, we do have ideas for what we want to do in the future, and we're kind of moving in that direction. So if you guys could be praying for my husband Kevin and I, we would really love it and appreciate it. Not that, I do feel like God is using both of us, and He has been using both of us throughout our whole health journey. But of course, we always want more. We want to be able to do more. So
We'll absolutely do that from my end. And there's always something that in this crazy communication tool, which is YouTube, where we basically take videos of ourselves, but it is communication. And so this communication has to include God, because that's where we come from. And so there is a lot of bright light that comes from somebody with such a strong faith as yourself. I think in every one of your communications, in every one of your videos, even if you don't even touch about matters of faith but talk about something else, that's something that is very visible, and in itself, I believe it's a witness in itself.
thank you for telling me that. That means a lot to me.
I really
I
believe.
always pray that that's the case.
I pray so too. And like you were saying before, it's really not easy to talk about the interaction between our faith and the world. I think it's probably never been in history, but boy, today it's a mess.
Yeah.
In particular, because of how the world is, how much of a intellectual and spiritual mess there is out there,
Mm-hmm.
and where and this is the reason why many people just give up and put their hands out and say, I'm not going to talk about it, even with my friends, because it's so sensitive,
Yeah.
and I risk, confronting people and alienating people that I'm not even going to bring up this topic, and it
Mhm.
becomes a problem sometimes.
Yeah, I could see that happening. There's been conversations even on YouTube that I've had where I did feel, I guess it's hard to share your faith in a situation where you just know it's not going to be accepted. It doesn't matter what you say, it's a no.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason they say, Thanksgiving dinner, don't bring up politics or religion, and
Yeah.
and that's the other question that I'm asking you, not because I have the answer, because I don't, but it's something that I've been reflecting and praying upon, which is the following: when it comes to evangelizing, and evangelizing has a horrible ring to it today, because no one wants you to preach about your faith or religion to them
Mhm.
if you don't think the same.
Mhm.
However, it's very, very plainly spelled out by Jesus in the gospel
Mhm.
that it's not just the apostles and the leaders of the church who is responsible to bring the good news and the good word, but it's all of us.
Mhm.
It's the entire body of Christ, is the entire church. So the question that I have is, what's the best way to do it? What's the best way to do it in a way that is not forceful, because nobody is asking us to be forceful, obviously, and is kind, is loving, and is open? What is the best way? And we can talk about it. I can even edit out this part. I don't care.
No, I love that question because yeah, I guess as an Enneagram 9, I tend to approach everything very, you tell me your opinion, I'll tell you mine, and then I'll pray for you. I might not directly confront people about things that I'm like, I don't know about that one. I might think it, but I might not actually say that. So I guess my approach will be to usually listen a lot, and if they have questions, I'll answer questions. But in general, I will point people to like C.S. Lewis. His apologetic works are great because for me as a teenager, that's where I went for a lot of answers. Works by C.S. Lewis. That was all I really knew to look to. So I guess I would say I point them towards books if they have more complicated questions that I can't necessarily answer. But I just kind of do my best to love them and listen, and yeah, that's my approach.
I mean, such a genius, C.S. Lewis. Are you
Yeah.
thinking of one or two specific titles, maybe?
When I was a teenager, I discovered God in the Dock, such a great book of essays. He touches on like evolution and like just tons of things that are still hot button things. You wouldn't necessarily think that is still, but it totally is. He talks about um, a, he talks about secular humanism and kind of how to find your way intellectually to faith, because some people need that direction, and that's how he found it. He was an atheist and gradually was changed his mind, through like myth and talks with Professor Tolkien. So
That
I feel like
would
he's a
have,
good resource.
if we could have talk to directly there, I think that could help, right?
Yeah, definitely.
But that's interesting. So, God in the Docs, that's the title of this collection of essays.
Hmm.
Wonderful.
That's one that I talk about. I would hand that to anybody and be like, check this out. Or
Yeah.
and
And
another one is The Abolition of Man. That one was really good too.
right, the abolition of man, which is maybe, I mean, it's considered to be a little difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's really for the big brain people who want to sit down and chew on it for a while.
Yeah.
God in the Dock is more like short essays. So that's what I would recommend to somebody who doesn't have like 5 hours to sit down and just read one book in one sitting and get it all.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, now that you mention it, I hope I'm not mistaken, but I believe that the Word on Fire Institute, by that's led by Bishop Barron, they just published a
Mm.
book that kind of goes together with the Abolition of Man, and
Mm.
it has a commentary. It's a separate book that kind of helps you read the Abolition of Man. So, just if anyone
Wow.
didn't know, that's a book that's out there on the Word on Fire website. Um,
That is so neat.
yeah, I don't get paid for this incredible. Um,
I love, I feel like Catholics in particular are really good at finding books that are like intellectually rigorous examinations of topics related to faith. I just love that about you guys.
um, as an Italian who lived in the Anglo-Saxon world, let's say, and then I moved to the United States, and I really started to properly understand the Protestant Christianity world only in the last few years, only in the last 5 or 6 years.
Mm,
I found it fascinating because the people that I respect the most intellectually are the ones, Protestant or Catholic, who worked and made an effort to bring us together, to bring
mm,
everything for unity, for unity.
yeah,
Because we don't realize sometimes we think we're going down a great path, but what we're doing is to sow discord and sow division. And
hmm,
especially when it comes to the different houses of Christianity, it's so easy because there are obviously divisions within Catholicism. There are divisions everywhere. So my sense, my, let's say, gut feeling is that the more we can obviously discuss and argue everything. That's great because it can
yeah,
be, but you can do that and not end up in a very fruitful place.
yeah,
If you want your conversation between Protestants and Catholic to be really fruitful, to bear fruit, the direction to take is unity. The direction to take is
yeah.
try to understand, try to find common ground because there's so much common ground, right?
Yes, I agree.
So that's part of, and I'm saying that because I recently read some work by Peter Kraft. He's an American Catholic theologian. He moved on. I think he moved from a Protestant, maybe Calvinist background into Catholicism. But
Mm,
when you hear him talk about the differences, you will never ever hear any type of negative note in his voice.
that's
He
amazing.
making the best efforts to bring people together. I really believe that's the right direction to go.
I agree. Yeah, we are the churches are sisters, They're yeah, there's so much in common. And I think a lot of the kind of gray area where people fall in between, it's literally just there's so much to think about. Not everybody can cover everything in their lifetime, and really we are one body.
So yeah, that's another, for somebody who is still listening to us, that's another author that I would suggest to anybody to check out. He's one of my favorite living American theologians. His name is Peter Kraft, and
Mhm.
I sent him an email a week ago to thank him for his work. A very simple, very spur of the moment email, and he replied to me within 2.5 minutes. That's
Wow,
how that's how incredible he is.
that is something right there.
Yeah, that's more than I was expecting, Christy. I'm so grateful for your time, first of all, and for sharing your experience. If you have anything maybe that you would like to say to close this brief chat.
Yeah, I think mainly please just thank you so much for this conversation, and please do pray for us. I believe that God can use everybody because of their weaknesses. He can shine through, and we're just hoping to get there one day where we could feel like God is really using us. So that's what I would, I guess, say. I don't know if that needs to be on this video or not. To you, though, that's what I would say.
Thank you. I think it will be, and I will certainly pray for you guys. And that's we do the best that we can, and then the rest we leave to him. So that's kind of, I think,
Yes.
quiet way to approach it. So
Thank
huge,
you.
huge thank you from one coast to the other. Thank you for
Yes.
coast connection. Okay.
Yes. Thank you so much. This was really wonderful.
Thanks again.